another episode of The Reading Corner with me, Mr. M. Today we're going to be reading part 2 of our story, The Master Builder. Last time we got up to the point where this new stranger has arrived in Asgard and has proposed to build a wall for the gods for the steep price of having Freya, the sun, and the moon. Now they have agreed to this, but Loki has devised a plan where they are setting him such a short time scale that they don't think he can do it. And we're about to see if he can. So, let's get started. The next morning as the sun rose, the god stood to watch the man work. He spat on his hands and began to dig the trench into which the first stones would go. "He digs deep," said Heimdall. "He digs fast," said Freya's brother. "Well, yes, obviously he is a mighty digger of ditches and trenches," said Loki grudgingly. "But imagine how many stones he will have to haul here from the mountains. It is one thing to dig a trench. It is another to haul stones many miles, unaided, and then place them, one stone upon the next, so tightly fitted that not an ant could crawl between them, higher than the tallest giant, to make a wall." Freya looked at Loki with disgust, but she said nothing. When the sun set, the builder mounted his horse and set off for the mountains to gather his first rocks. The horse dragged an empty stone boat behind it, a low sled that it pulled across the soft earth. The gods watched them leave. The moon was high and pale in the early winter sky. "He will be back in a week," said Loki. "I am curious to see how many rocks that horse can haul. It looks strong." The gods went to their feast hall then, and there was much merriment and laughter, but Freya did not laugh. It snowed before dawn, a light dusting of snowflakes, a presentiment of the deep snows that would come further into the winter. Heimdall, who saw everything approaching Asgard, and who missed nothing, woke the gods in the darkness. They gathered by the trench the stranger had dug the previous day. In the gathering dawn they watched the builder, walking beside his horse, coming towards them. The horse was steadily dragging a score of blocks of granite, so heavy that the sled made deep ruts in the black earth. When the man saw the gods, he waved and called good morning cheerfully. He pointed to the rising sun, and he winked at the gods. Then he unhitched his horse from the rocks and let it graze, while he began to manhandle the first of the granite blocks into the trench he had already dug to receive it. "The horse is indeed strong," said Balder, most beautiful of all the Aesir. "No normal horse should be able to drag rocks that heavy." "It is stronger than we imagined," said Kvasir, the wise. "Ah," said Loki, "the horse will soon tire. This was its first day on the job. It will not be able to haul that many stones every night, and winter is coming. The snows will be deep and thick, the blizzards will be blinding, and the way to the mountain will be difficult. There is nothing to worry about. This is all going according to plan." "I hate you so much," said Freya, who stood unsmiling beside Loki. She walked back to Asgard in the dawn and did not stay to watch the stranger build the foundations of his wall. Each night the builder and the horse and the empty stone boat left for the mountain. Each morning they returned, with the horse dragging another 20 blocks of granite, every block larger than the tallest man. Each day the wall grew, and by evening it was bigger and more imposing than it had been before. Odin called the gods to him. "The wall is growing apace," he said, "and we swore an unbreakable oath, a ring oath and a weapon oath, that if he finishes building his wall in time, we will give him the sun and the moon and the hand in marriage of Freya the Beautiful." Kvasir the Wise said, "No man can do what the master builder is doing. I suspect he must be something other than a man." "A giant," said Odin, "perhaps." "If only Thor were here," sighed Balder. "Thor is hammering trolls away in the east, said Odin, and even if he were to return, our oaths are mighty and binding. Loki tried to reassure them. We are like old women, getting ourselves all worried about nothing. The builder cannot finish the wall before the first day of summer, even if he is the most powerful giant in the land. It is impossible. I wish Thor were here, said Heimdall. He would know what to do. The snows fell, but the deep snow did not stop the wall builder, and it did not slow Svadilfari, his horse. The grey stallion pulled his sled, piled high with rocks, through the snowdrifts and through blizzards, up steep hills and down again, through icy gorges. The days began to get longer. Dawn came earlier each morning. The snows began to melt, and the wet mud that was exposed was thick and heavy, the kind of mud that clings to your boots and drags you down. The horse will never be able to haul those rocks through the mud, said Loki. They will sink, and he will lose his footing. But Svadilfari was sure-footed and implaceable, even in the thickest, wettest mud, and he hauled the rocks to Asgard, although the stone boat was so heavy it could cut gashes into the sides of the hills. Now the builder was hauling the rocks up hundreds of feet, and manhandling each rock into place. The mud dried, and the spring flowers came out, yellow coltsfoot and white wood anemones in profusion, and the wall being built around Asgard was a glorious, imposing thing. When it was finished, it would be impregnable. No giant, no troll, no dwarf, no mortal would be able to breach that wall, and the stranger continued to build it with relentless good humour. He did not seem to care if it rained or it snowed, and neither did his horse. Each morning they would bring the rocks from the mountains. Each day the builder would lay the granite blocks upon the previous layer. Now it was the last day of winter, and the wall was all but completed. The gods sat on their thrones in Asgard, and they spoke. "The sun," said Balder. "We have given away the sun. We have placed the moon in the sky in order to mark off the days and the weeks of the year," said Bragi, god of poetry, moodily. "Now there will be no moon." "And Freya? What would we do without Freya?" asked Tyr. "If this builder is actually a giant," said Freya, with ice in her voice, "then I will marry him and follow him back to Jotunheim, and it will be interesting to see whom I hate more, him for taking me away, or all of you for giving me to him." "Now, don't be like that," began Loki, but Freya interrupted him and said, "If this giant does take me, and the sun, and the moon, then I ask only for one thing from the gods of Asgard." "Name it," said Odin Allfather, who had said nothing until now. "I would like to see whoever caused this calamity killed before I go," said Freya. "I think it only fair. If I am to go into the land of the frost giants, if the moon and the sun are to be plucked from the sky and the world plunged into eternal darkness, then the life of the one who got us to this point should be forfeit." "Ah," said Loki, "the apportioning of blame is so difficult. Who remembers exactly who suggested what? As I recall, all the gods share equally in this unfortunate mistake. We all suggested it. We all agreed to it." "You suggested it," said Freya. "You talked these idiots into it, and I will see you dead before I leave Asgard." "We all," began Loki, but he saw the expressions on the faces of all the gods in the hall, and he fell silent. "Loki, son of Laufey," said Odin, "this is the result of your poor counsel." "And it was as bad as all your other advice," said Balder. Loki shot him a resentful glance. "We need the builder to lose his wager," said Odin. "Without violating the oath, he must fail." "I don't know what you expect me to do about it," said Loki. "I do not expect anything from you," said Odin. "But if this builder succeeds in finishing his wall by the end of tomorrow, then your death will be painful and long and bad and shameful death at that." Loki looked from one god to the next, and in each of their faces he saw his death, saw anger and resentment. He did not see mercy or forgiveness. It would be a bad death indeed. But what were the alternatives? What could he do? He did not dare to attack the builder. On the other hand, Loki nodded. Leave it to me. He walked from the hall, and none of the gods tried to stop him. The builder finished placing his load of stones on the wall. Tomorrow, on the first day of summer, as the sun was setting, he would finish his wall, and then he would leave Asgard with his wages. So that is where we are going to end for today. We have one more part left in this chapter, and we will conclude with the Master Builder next week. I really hope you've enjoyed listening and reading with me today. I'll see you next time.